we sort of just ran into this conversation, and we started in the lobby. I'm like, let's record this because this is such good stuff. I had mentioned one client who's got what seems to be recurring scarlet fever every time they get an infection, respiratory infection, and maybe like a history of having strep in their youth, but now as an adult, they just keep getting this rash that kind of just flares up and seeming to be getting worse and worse as years go by. And Julian, I just had to like put you on pause so that I can start recording some of this. And you were kind of doing a little bit of a study and looking at strep being sort of like this latent infection that keeps on creeping up. Do you want to speak more to that?
Yeah, so group A strep is a form of strep, right? So with individuals that have, say, conditions like, scarlet fever, which is, the bumpiness around, could be systemically, like, throughout the body, on the skin. Some can be bigger, some can be smaller, some can be itchy and whatnot. So there is an immune type of reaction when that's obviously flourishing, right? And then, again, some people will get like the chronic strep throat infections that are, being triggered by the immune system, right? But the immune system is being triggered because of like, yeah, lifestyle factors, food, sure, which is triggering the so-called group A strep, right? Which needs to be dealt with long term in order for the immune system to actually, pick up again. And then we're able to detoxify. So we're not getting reoccurring, hey, I have itchiness, hives, red bumps. And even saying that, there could be a histamine component to that too, right? So histamine, obviously, we need certain amounts of it. It works on the immune system. But if we're having reoccurring histamine responses, then it's like, there's still gut health to work on. There's so many factors to work on, right? But at the end of the day, if someone's having reoccurring, you know, scarlet fever symptoms, the big corporate will potentially be group A strep,
Yeah.
right? That needs to be dealt with long term.
So, obviously Zoom enjoyed what you were saying because the fireworks went off as you were speaking.
Oh, really?
I don't know if you noticed, but that's fantastic. Don't change
I
that.
think it's the I
Um,
think it's the thumbs up.
Wow.
was it? If I do this, do I
Good
get
Like you
it?
old.
like hit the nail on the head because you you
Oh,
cleared the point,
That
and
was
then you had
interesting.
fireworks. It was great.
I like that. That's some AI positive feedback there.
Wow.
I never get any fireworks. So like like a very basic thought in my mind is if someone, let's say someone has strep, and let's say they do antibiotics or even natural treatments, why is it not gone? Is it not gone for everyone? Are certain people, is there a component of it that just lingers in our lymphatics? How would you explain that?
I think strep antibiotics. So when people are taking like ongoing antibiotics, like rounds, when this type of situation arises, what's happening too, we have to think of strep is actually developing resistance to antibiotics. So the antibiotics are actually not doing anything technically. It's just making it more resistant to that, class or category of this antibiotic we're using for strep, especially if they've been using the same type of antibiotic for years and rounds too, right? So the antibiotics will potentially be just be doing nothing in a sense, actually creating more of an environment, the whole terrain that's causing, gut issues, which now creates a histamine response too. Now you have more to actually work on. It's not just like you're tackling strep now. Now you have to work on your whole terrain, gut health, histamine response, and then like how that can play into like so many downstream effects with methylation and food sensitivities and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I find like antibiotics are great, but I mean, if you're using the same antibiotics all the time for the same condition or the same kind of here we go again, chronic strep throat or hives, then it's actually becoming more resistant to that. So it's actually not even the immune system is saying, well, this is nothing. I'm not going to even do anything at this point, right? It's not going to kill, a bacteria or wipe it out, right? It's just going to potentially even wipe out good flora or good bacteria too.
Let's say someone has been on antibiotics a couple times, and they do feel that they're just more prone to strep or sinus infections. What would be like a few steps that they can do to help reduce their susceptibility? Whether that is, how would they address the terrain? How would they address their immunity and maybe even this resistance that maybe we by proxy have created?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously taking specific probiotics or even the soil-based probiotics too, right? Just to help counteract what kind of like we're killing off too. We can obviously use things that modulate the immune system at the same time, like, good dosages of vitamin D, for example, or even using things in concurrent with antibiotics too, like, things like vitamin A, because vitamin A could be antiviral but can also help the immune system at the same time, right? So I believe there's always things we can do in combination when using specific antibiotics, and then obviously supporting the individual, what their needs are or what their history has told us that they need support of, whether it's, more gut health, ingredients, whether it's more immune modulating, or if people are in like the whole neuropsychiatric, sure, there's things to help calm the nervous system too, right? So I guess it would depend obviously on the individual, what their, whole terrain and history looks like.
Yeah.
But for sure, we can support antibiotic usage with, yes, good probiotics, good prebiotics for some people too as well, and some immune modulating things like vitamin D and vitamin A, right?
Okay, that's amazing. Back to my rash friends. We were talking about maybe needing to detox and some environmental or dietary or lifestyle stuff that was going on. And detox is a very broad term, and maybe we can take some time to kind of piece out what different detoxes do for different people. Like, very popular right now is infrared saunas. What would you say? And even Kaya, please give your input in terms of the benefits of sauna, in terms of detoxing and other benefits.
I'm just gonna be so frank. I feel like I'm lost in the world of detox because, as you mentioned, there's just so many different ways that you can detoxify and target different areas of your body. Something I actually spoke about with Dr. Maria Granzotto at one point was the skin being the organ of your body that typically shows when you're detoxifying, because this is where your body tends to push things, right? So we see things sort of pop up in the skin, and that tells us like, okay, something somewhere else is, trying to get rid of something through the skin and back out into
Right.
the environment and to leave our internal environments. And I thought that was really interesting. Um, so when I think about detox, I think my mind has sort of been shifting that way and like looking at maybe external things that we can do that sort of target different areas of the body. Right now, with my own studies and some of the work that I was doing, I think my mind sort of goes to even just like an Epsom salt bath and how that's different than like ingesting magnesium yourself and having it in your bath to sort of help your muscles relax that way. So that's one thing I think of, and maybe not in the sense of detox, but just a way that you can sort of move through the skin
Mm.
and penetrate your body that way, a little bit differently than what we sometimes think, and how it just kind of pushes you in the right direction in terms of healing and recovery. Um, in terms of detox, I want to leave it to Julian. I feel like
Well,
he's
you brought up good points. And Julian, Kaya mentioned, Epsom salts and using the skin as like a detox organ.
mhm,
And definitely we do see that. I mean, someone going through some kind of little crisis, they'll have like breakouts, whether it's on their body, on their face.
hive. Yeah.
And that's a clear sign that the body's moving things. So what would you say to that?
Yeah, and I think even the more research detox is like, again, this broad category, right? And to me, it's like, what are we detoxing to for
Mhm.
that individual? So if we have, a cluster of environmental pollutants like plastics, VOCs, or, you get into the whole mold talk, and then you get into the
Mhm.
whole bacterial fungal, that's where individualized types of detox protocols can be useful because you're actually targeting what we're specifically detoxing, in our, I like to say it, a cocktail, right? Everyone has kind of a different cocktail full of different bacteria, funguses, environmental toxicants, and you can get very specific. If someone's not really, jiving on the detox, or they're just reacting too much, then it's like, okay, well, what are we actually looking at that we need to specifically even focus even more on? Is it heavy metals? Is it, again, the mold, or microtoxins or bacteria? But then understanding that person's, again, history and terrain, you can kind of get more personalized in what we're detoxing. And then even from foundational side, if someone has, simple little things like air fresheners in their house, and obviously processed foods and whatnot, sure, that's, you pull those out, they're already detoxing, right? So that's like a foundational step. But like, on the other spectrum, sure, what are we actually targeting that the individual needs to detox? And then yes, using infrared saunas, Epsom salt bath, I think those are all always beneficial. But then there's the sensitive people where they can't even handle 5 minutes in a sauna, right? So like, what are we actually, what are we dealing with? Do we give things, orally that are simple and gentler, or do we work on more drainage using like homeopathy, just working on the kidneys, the lymphatic, the bowels, for example? So I think things come in at specific times for certain individuals, right? Everyone's just completely different too. But again, detoxing is like, what are we actually targeting for the individual that needs to be detoxed, that's causing the immune system to be reactive, right?
It's all true, and I think we have to react in response to what the patient is showing us and what their tolerance and their ability is, because underlying a detox is meant to make you feel better at some point, but historically you tend to feel a little bit worse during that process. I mean, I use the analogy of like exercise, like, you might not feel good now, but afterwards you're going to feel fantastic. So if you, let's say someone's like, I want to do a detox, I want to lose a little bit of weight, I feel like my gut health is a little bit off. And let's say we put them on like an elimination diet, or we change up their probiotics, or we give them like an antimicrobial. The idea is that they're going to get rid of some bacteria in their gut, and yeast and parasites or whatever there may be, that will reduce that burden. And also the idea of like less toxins coming in is already part of a detox. So cleaning up your diet means that you've got less garbage to deal with. So let's say this person is doing this detox, and after a week, they're like, I feel terrible. I don't know if it's the supplements. I've been nauseous. I've been vomiting. I've had diarrhea. I have no appetite. This would tell me that what we gave the person is maybe slightly beyond what they can manage right now.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're having a side effect. They just might be having a detoxing effect,
Yeah.
which can be uncomfortable, which can be worse than how they initially felt. So then, Julian, you mentioned that, using maybe a homeopathic detox. And homeopathics are a great type of medicine that we can really get an effect while having very low physiological intervention, because it's such a diluted therapy. It's working on a level that is maybe unclear, maybe not as potent as something else might be, but you will get benefit. And the individual will be like, you know what, when I move to this, whether it's not necessarily herbal, but homeopathic or dilution therapy, I found that I was able to take these remedies. I did feel a change. I did feel an improvement. Maybe it took me 2 weeks instead of one, but now I'm noticing that I am going to the washroom better. I feel less bloated. I feel less cravings. I feel lighter, and I don't have pain under my liver. And so we get to have an effect on the patient in a positive way by responding to what they're telling us and what they're showing us. And sometimes with experience, we can be like, you know what, you look a little bit too toxic right now. We're going to go slow. We're going to go a little bit more gentle. And then maybe even a side step to like dilution or supplements, or even dietary. It can be physical. We can say like, hey, have you been walking? Have you been moving? Have you been in the water? Have you been in a sauna? If they're like, no, I can't manage, so like I get really like headachy and nauseous, and like even 5 minutes in, how about like a hot and cold shower, something that is like, hopefully the shower is amenable to you. Most people have access to it. You don't have to do something fancy like a sauna, but at least some contrast, some change. And people like they're like, oh, I walk. Does that count? I'm like, that's a minimum. I
Mhm.
mean, some people could even consider using a rebounder
Yeah.
or like it's something that where you're going to get lymphatic compression. You're going to start moving tissues and organs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Really good.
I think people have to start thinking outside the box and not be afraid of their body, like working their body, because they need to do something. At some point, you're like, I've been gaining weight, I have no motivation, I'm tired, I'm lethargic, my labs haven't been looking good. Where do you start?
I think that those are really great points. And I also just wanted to mention that communication piece between the practitioner and the client or patient is so important. That's something that, really, really shapes a personalized program, I find. Like if I prescribe something to a client, whether it be for exercise or like resistance training or aerobic, and they're like, oh yeah, it's great, everything's going fantastic. But then I'm also finding out down the line, like, yeah, I've implemented this, but it means that I'm not cooking dinner twice a week. And so then I'm eating out, or I'm really, really sore. So I'm not commuting. I'm not taking the stairs anymore as I commute. Now I take the escalator or the elevator. Those little changes that eventually start to accumulate. And what we're trying to do is progress as opposed to replace, right? We want to add more in some sense. And whether that's in a detox or in a regimen, maybe it's not adding more, but it's less, right? We want to take less supplements and things like that. So
Mhm.
that might be something for us to really focus on going forward, is that communication piece, and hearing that subjective account back from our clients is, okay, this was great, but this is, I also noticed this happened in that time frame, and that can, I think, be really important to know.
Touching upon that, and Kaya, you're familiar with using the in-body with our clients.
Yeah.
One nice cheat that I've started to notice in terms of if someone is retaining water,
Hmm.
is the extracellular water over total
Yeah.
body water. And I tend to find that if someone, there's a kind of like a threshold number at 0.36.
Hmm.
And if someone is in like the 0.37, 0.38, 0.39, even up to 0.4, they are highly concentrating water. And how I explain it to them is stress chemicals in the body, think of them like salt. And wherever there's salt or electrolytes, wherever it's shifting, it draws water. So the more stress you have, the more water will be kind of in between tissues, and you're going to feel heavy, sluggish. Your
Yeah.
ankles are going to be swollen. You're going to wake up, your eyes are going to be puffy, your rings don't come off. And I use the in body as a way not just to look at body fat, because body fat also can be an indicator of like, hey, your visceral fat is like 14 and your percent body fat is like 40. You're
Yeah.
going to be holding this adipose, which we know is a bank for a lot of toxic material. So
Yeah.
as we can see that those numbers start to come down, you also want to see these water levels start to normalize.
Yeah.
And sometimes that looks like over a weekend, the person be like, I thought I had a urinary infection. It's like peeing every 20 minutes. I just like, I deflated.
Yeah.
And sometimes women on their period, they'll notice like whether it's before or after, they feel really heavy. And then
Yeah.
like all of a sudden it just kind of like leaves them.
Yeah.
So these are good like kind of like parameters that look at
Good
like how do
measures.
I measure how toxic I am?
Yeah.
Julian, do you have any like tests at whether like whether it's Vibrant or any other lab that's a good way for someone to say like, hey, you know what, I'm kind of toxic right now. This is something I was curious about and is showing it's like, yeah, I've got this going on.
Yeah, I mean, Vibrant does a toxicant panel. There's many other labs in that basically looks at the whole general, what's in our environmental, right? Whether it's the plastics, the VOCs, and it breaks it down even further than that. Then you can get even more specific too, right? Like an organic acid test can look at, things like systemic bacteria and yeast, but also like another important part with detoxification could be methylation, right?
Mhm.
So proper B vitamin status, are we, do we have susceptibility to, MTHFR gene? Do we need to support with methylfolate? So that again, the test can help, become even more deeper and individualized to the person while they are incorporating the other lifestyle factors, the exercise, the food, to have a whole well-rounded approach, right? And that's where you develop a team, right? Where you're getting all this, necessary work or, recommendations and help to promote your own longevity in the future too, because that's always the goal as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Parting shots from both of you in terms of detox, in terms of encouraging like progressing through your health journey so that you don't get stuck, and things that you've seen that have been, successful efforts.
Subjective and objective measures. Take what your clients tell you, listen to them, they know their bodies, but refer back to your objective measures as well. Make sure all of that's lining up, whether you've taken an outcome measure, if that's a measure of pain, whether you're looking at an antibody analysis, a range of motion, a strength test, anything. Have both of them. Make sure that things are lining up so that you're not missing anything, I would say.
Let me jump on that. That's such a funny anecdote because this was going way back, but I had a new patient and he had some digestive stuff. We did his in-body, and then a week later, he called me complaining. He's like, my stomach's not feeling better. I don't know what's going on. The stuff you gave me isn't agreeing with me. I'm like, okay, well, you're coming in next week. Let's review.
Yeah.
I came in and I did his in-body again. So this is about 2 weeks apart. And he had gone up 10 pounds. And I'm like, and 10, it's not an exaggeration. I'm like, what happened here? And he's like, well, I was on vacation. I'm like, so when you called me upset, you were at a resort. He goes, yeah, we were drinking, we're eating. I wasn't doing anything you were telling me. And I'm like, but you left that out when you complained and saying how horrible you felt. And so, yeah. So having objective
You would
measures.
have felt horrible either way.
And I'm like, I'm glad I had that, because then I'm like, if I didn't see that he had gained 10 pounds in 2 weeks, I'm like, you're not listening.
Yeah,
So objective
that's
measures.
hilarious.
Julian?
Yeah, even to touch on that, it's just like understanding, someone's, and we always use the terrain theory, right? Because it's the terrain theory can dictate a lot of, what is going on or what struggles they come up upon, right? So it's always good to know and understand someone's history too, or knowing their own history too, because that can change or different courses, or you can add different, other recommendations too for that individual to help, break those plateaus, right? Because, we're all going to come up against the plateaus as well, but it's just like understanding the whole terrain part of it too, in order to promote, again, to get over those plateaus and again, to have quality and health span too, right?
Julian, thank you. I give you 2 thumbs up, but you already gave it to yourself 3 times with the fireworks. I don't know if you see it on your end. It's so funny.
I didn't see it. No, it's something.
Oh, we
I
see
gotta,
it.
it's interesting. Maybe that's a good
Kaya,
thing.
2 thumbs up to you as well. Thank you for your time, guys.
Okay.
And we love doing these, so we'll do a lot more. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.